everybody, Kim here today with the Board Game Mechanics, and I want to show you Professor Treasure's Secret Sky Castle, a 2-player puzzle game that'll have you planning out your strategic moves for days. So what's the basis of this game? Well, basically, all of the world's treasures have been stolen by Professor Treasure and hidden in his secret floating castle. So you and your team of treasure hunters have found this castle, but you're not alone. So now it's become a race between you and your opponent. It's a 2-player puzzle game where you're going to take turns placing your team of treasure hunters on tiles, showing different treasures, different treasure chests, artifacts, and keys that you're going to need to open those treasure chests. So you always have to be thinking ahead to either block a move of your opponent's or to try to make sure that you snag that key or that treasure that you really need to have. So let's take a look at it. So here we have a basic setup of a game. You're going to have 12 tiles set out randomly, and there's a decent stack of tiles in the game. It's going to be 3 tall, 4 wide, and we've got different types of treasures here. So we have artifacts. Now these are going to score based upon how many artifacts you have at the end of the game. So this is an in-game scoring mechanism. You have keys here. Now, as you can see here on the chest, it's going to tell you how many keys you need to have in your possession before you can actually take that chest. So you have to collect keys starting on. There are skeleton keys that you can also collect, but those are going to cost you. So your first skeleton key is free. However, after that, it's -1, -3, -6, so on. So you're not going to want to collect a lot of these skeleton keys. You're going to want to go after these actual keys here within the play area. Now, how do I get these keys? Well, that's great. The first thing here I'm going to show you is that you've got a team of experts that are here to help you collect all these. All right, so let's take a look at the team here. Now, first thing I want to point out is that each player's team, they look exactly alike. So you have the same team, just one is blue, one is red. Those are the only differences between what each player is going to have in their hand. Now you'll see up in the top left-hand corner there is a number. So when you start resolving these cards, you're going to resolve them in numerical order. So starting with 1 up through your exclamation point, which is actually 7. Now your exclamation point could take effect at any time, but otherwise you do have 7 different team members who are going to be helping you steal some treasure. So the first one here is our scout. Now you'll see here in the bottom, that's where you can see what his ability, what that text reads. So you're going to place him on an empty tile, and you may swap the tile he is on with an adjacent tile. Now that happens as you're resolving them. So if I were to place him here on this artifact, I would have the option then when I'm resolving that to swap him with any of these other tiles here on the board. So that's an option to kind of throw off your opponent, so they don't really know where you place that scout, what cards you may actually be after. So it's a lot harder to counter that particular move. Now, we also have the lookout. We're going to put him on an empty tile now, where I just mentioned how the scout can swap tiles out. With the lookout, the tile under him cannot be swapped by a rival, so then he takes the tile that he is on. So that's pretty much a surefire bet, with one kind of caveat to that we'll get to here momentarily. That's one way to secure your treasure. Now, number 3 here, we have a sentry. Now, this one's a little bit tricky. So we're going to place on an empty tile or under an ally. So you could have a different ally out there. So he's going to protect himself and an ally from theft. And we'll get into theft just a little bit later. And he cannot act until the ally above acts, and then takes the tile he is on, or a diagonal tile. So this one's number 3 here. So we could have, potentially, I could put him under the lookout to absolutely make sure that I'm not going to get anything taken. But he may work better under the scout, who can swap tokens. And as you'll see, as we look through some of the other characters, there's opportunities that may be more beneficial for him to sit with another one of your characters. Now, coming up next, we have the captain. So the captain works a little differently by the fact that we're going to place him on the outside of a row or a column. And this is going to allow him to take a tile in this row or column. This is another great way to throw off your opponent. They're not really sure. They have an idea of where you're going. But if you were to place the captain here on the outside of this row, Now your opponent only knows, well, they're going to be taking one from somewhere in there. They don't know which one you're after. So that's a great play with the captain. Moving on, we have the Jeweler. This is one of my favorite cards. So this one also, you're going to place on an empty tile, but she works very similar to the captain, but she's just placed within that row. So she can take a tile in her row or in her column. So she's still going to be here on the board, but your opponent doesn't know which one that you're going to take. So that makes her quite sneaky. I very much, the Jeweler's probably one of my favorite thieves here within my Treasure Hunters Guild. And then lastly, in this section, we have the Smuggler. So this particular agent allows you to place them on an empty tile, and then you take the tile she's on. If that tile is taken by a rival, the Smuggler instantly takes any adjacent tile. So, for instance, if I was trying for this artifact and it didn't work out, lo and behold, my opponent was able to snag that out from under me. Maybe they had the Jeweler played, and just because I'm on a tile doesn't mean that I'm going to actually get that tile. My opponent could take it out from under me unless I have protections like with the Sentry or something like that. But I would still be able to take any of these other tiles here. And again, it's marked there on her card which one of those adjacent tiles that you would be able to take. So you can still get something out of that play. And maybe you do that strategically. You assume that your opponent's going to go after that artifact, so you go ahead and place it there to kind of throw them off in hopes of actually being able to take one of those adjacent tiles. Now, our last two members of the gang are the Explorer. So you can place this card on an empty tile or on top of a rival. So that would be one of your opponent's characters. So any character beneath this Explorer cannot act until after he does, and he takes an adjacent tile. So the Explorer is a way to block your opponent. So if by chance your opponent had played the Lookout here on this key, and you're like, well, I'm not letting him get that key that early, you could play your Explorer over top of that. And as you're resolving these in numerical order, your opponent would not be able to resolve that 2 until after you resolve your 7. So that means it's more of a chance you may be able to swipe in and take something extra that they want, and you're still going to be able to take one of these adjacent tiles. So something to consider when you play the Explorer. And last but certainly not least, you have a Thief. So this is another card that you're going to play outside of a column. So the Thief, when a rival in this column takes a tile, you may thief it instead. So if your opponent was taking any of these, you'd be able to swipe in and go, nope, that chest is mine instead. The only card that could help you at that point would be your Sentry. So if you happen to have your Sentry along with that tile, then I wouldn't be able to thief it. But otherwise, this is a very handy card. Now the gameplay I find to be pretty interesting. So what kind of shakes things up each round is that you don't have a guarantee as having all of your treasure hunting team available to you. So what you're going to do, you and your opponent each round, you're going to have to shuffle them up. You'll play through 3 different rounds. So for each round, you're going to shuffle up your cards, remove 2. So we'll take this one and we'll take this one. So that leaves me with this as my team. And that means that the Lookout and the Sentry are removed from the game for that particular round. I have no access to them. I'm not going to be able to play those 2 cards. That Sentry's not going to help me. And whenever you choose player turns, that's another interesting kind of change up in the game. It's not just I place one, my opponent places one. So then as you decide who's going to go first, you're actually going to choose the order that you're going to play the cards prior to you playing them. So you have to be thinking ahead, when do I want to have this card available to me? When is it most beneficial for me to have this? The first player makes 3 sets of 2 roll cards each face down. The second player makes 2 sets of 3 roll cards face down. So what does that mean? That means the first player is going to place 2 cards. Then the second player will place 3 cards that have already been previously chosen. So you don't get to look through your hand and decide as your opponent plays. Then it goes back to the first player. They play another 2. It goes back to the second player. They play their last 3, and then the first player then plays their final 2. At the end of the round, once all of the numbers have been resolved, then you basically take your artifacts, stack them up on your side, and then you'll refill the play area, again with another 12 tiles. And you'll play through the 3 rounds and add up the scores at the end, and you're done. So let's go back up to the top, and I'll give you some of my final thoughts on Professor Treasure's Secret Sky Castle. All right, so that was Professor Treasure's Secret Sky Castle from Level 99 Games, another solid showing from that game company. Certainly has some great artwork in it that ties into the theme of the game. You're on this treasure hunt, so all of your characters sort of have those kind of roles. The art on the tiles are keys and treasure chests and artifacts, so it's perfect for a treasure hunt. So they did a great job tying the theme together with the art from the game, so great artwork yet again. We always seem to enjoy the artwork from Level 99, so keep up the great work, guys. Like, it always looks amazing. The game is also incredibly easy to learn and teach. So once you kind of go through what each character does, then it's just playing them, essentially. It does take some time to figure out, how am I going to play them? I think that's a great mechanic that they added into the game. The fact that I have to choose those movements ahead of time. And then it's a little bit different whether I'm player 1 or player 2. So that certainly adds a little depth to this game. You can't just, oh, my opponent played that card, now I'm going to play this one. You don't get to do that. So I love that idea of having to plan that out to kind of program almost your steps and what you're going to do next. And that certainly keeps this game refreshing in the fact that you have to shuffle every round and remove 2 of those characters. So you're not always going to have that full arsenal. You can't play the same thing every single time. That certainly keeps it, like I said, keeps it fresh, keeps the game moving, keeps it from falling into the exact same familiar pattern. So I really dig that. It's also very portable. So you can throw this in a bag, you can take it camping, you can take it on a trip, you can take it to a convention, you can take it somewhere that you know you're going to have some downtime and you need just a little bit of table space. So as you could see when I laid it out, the tiles aren't huge. It takes up a little bit of space, but not a ton of space. As you know, some other games. So it certainly is very portable, which I think sometimes can be huge for a 2-player game. That's half the fun. If you're going away on a trip and you want to be able to take some board games with you, this is certainly one that can tag along. Those are a lot of my pros for the game. I really only have a couple of cons, and I want to say that lightly. I would almost call them neutrals instead of cons because they're not hurting the game in any way. So I would say the components. Now, the tiles themselves, like I showed you earlier, the tiles are great. Big, thick tiles with great artwork on them. Just keep drinks off the table and away from these guys. Now, the cards, on the other hand, I will say the cards are a little flimsy. So these aren't the thickest card. It's not a thick card stock. Now, to get around that, maybe you just sleeve your cards, and that would work out great. If you're anti-sleeve, then you just keep drinks off the table, and you might want to just make sure you store these nice and tight in the box. The box is set up so the cards can sit all the way down into the bottom, and that does keep them from moving around and certainly protects them a lot. But I'm just concerned that after playing through them a lot, they're going to have some wear on the sides if you don't do something to protect them. The replayability, I just think this could be a matter of I've learned my opponent's moves. Now, what I mentioned before, though, what helps keeps that fresh is you've got to remove 2 characters each turn. So I think that they've really combated against that. And then my only other, I guess maybe con is the rule sheet. And when I say rule sheet, it's a very large rule sheet. So I won't fold this thing all the way out, but this is just one side of it, and then it folds out. This just makes it really hard if I'm out somewhere and I need to reference a rule. It's hard to get to. It's hard to look through. It's hard to figure out where it is in this giant. It's almost like having a roadmap. So a nice little rule book would have been more convenient for the player to look up rules and stuff like that. As small as this box is, like I held up the cover of it, it's possible that maybe this is just what worked for them to put it in. So with all things being said, I certainly give this a 4 out of 5. I think it's a great solid game for 2 players. It's a lot of fun. I recommend, either check out at your local game store to see if they have it in stock, or head over to Level 99's Games website and order a copy for yourself. So from everyone here at the Board Game Mechanics, thank you so much for watching. We appreciate your support. Be sure to like and subscribe here on YouTube. Give us a follow over on Facebook. You can even join #The Riveted Facebook group, where we talk a little more in depth on board games, what we're playing today, and just some fun, jolly banter back and forth. Be sure to let us know in the comments what other games you'd like to hear us or see us review. We certainly have review copies coming in, plus we have a pretty decent collection between all of us. We can always probably find a game that you're looking for, and we'd love to do a review on it. We love sharing our love of board games with all of you. So thank you guys again for your support. Keep gaming!